All right, 1.2 observational studies versus designed experiments. So we're going to look at these two objectives here. So our first objective, distinguish between observational study and an experiment. So let's first look at an example of some experiments or some studies happening, and then we'll talk more about the difference of those things. So first, we have these researchers who want to determine whether there is an association between mobile phone use and brain tumors. And so they go through and collect these numbers. So we have almost 800,000 middle-aged women in the United Kingdom followed over 7 years. There were 1,261 incidents of brain tumors. So they compared the women who never used a cell phone to those who used mobile phones and found no significant difference between the two groups. Then we had researchers from the U.S. National Toxicology Program conducted a study to address the concern of radio frequency radiation and seeing if it is associated with developing brain tumors. And so since they really couldn't do that on humans, they did that on rats. And so they assigned 90 rats to one of 3 groups. Each group was housed in a chamber that allowed the rats to be exposed to the RFR. Okay, so group 1 was not exposed to any. Group 2 was exposed to what we call as GSM, and then group 3 was exposed to a CDMA. Okay, so they have all these different types. They're looking at those. So the rats in groups 2 and 3 had these cycles, 10 minutes exposed, 10 minutes off, through this routine throughout. Okay, so they did all of those types of pieces, and they all had the same access to everything else. And so they found low incidences of brain tumors in the rats. Okay, and so it was not significantly significant for these pieces. Okay. All right. So both studies, even though one didn't have as much involved, the other one had a ton of things involved. They were there to determine if radio frequencies from cell phones increase the risk of contracting brain tumors. And so whether or not we got a brain tumor or brain cancer, that was the response variable. The level of cell phone usage was the explanatory variable. So those things are important to be able to pick out on those. Okay. So in research, we wish to determine how varying the amounts of the explanatory variable affects the value of the response variable for those. Okay. All right. Now, an observational study, this means that we just observe. We see what happens without messing with anything, without changing anything, and take those observations and look at the data and see if it has any outcomes from it. Okay. A designed experiment is where we manipulate things. We have a group that is kind of stays the same. We don't make any changes, but then another group we make some changes, and we look at that data and see how it affects that. Okay, so those are the big differences. An observation means that we're just watching, not making any changes. An experiment, we are manipulating values. We are changing things to see what happens when we make those changes. Okay. All right, so here, again, another example. It says researchers wanted to determine the long-term benefits of the flu vaccine in seniors. Okay, and so they looked at records for 36,000 seniors for 10 years. Then the seniors were divided into 2 groups. Group 1 got the vaccine, Group 2 did not. And after observing the seniors for 10 years, it was determined that the seniors who got flu shots were 27% less likely to be hospitalized and 48% less likely to die. All right, so based on this, would you recommend that they get the flu shot? Yes, because that is a pretty good piece there with those things. We want to make sure that we're doing those. Okay. All right, now studies have flaws, namely confounding. All right, so confounding, that is when Effects of two or more explanatory variables are not separated. So we've got to be careful with those things and make sure that we know the difference on those, okay? Lurking is another place, and that is when we have a variable that's not considered in the study, okay? So some examples in this flu study is age, health status, mobility. You know, are they already weak and possibly on their way to death, even though they would have taken the flu shot or not? So there's a lot of lurking variables that can happen, right? So for this in particular study, even after accounting for lurking variables, we still conclude that yes, we should be getting the flu shot if you're a senior over 65. Now, observational studies do not allow a researcher to claim causation, only association, because we don't know why things are happening. We just know that there is an association with those pieces, but we don't know that it causes certain things because we're just observing. Now, again, confounding variable to an explanatory variable that was considered in a study whose effect cannot be distinguished from a secondary variable. All right. The various types of observational studies. So the first one is a cross-sectional. All right, so observational studies that collect information about individuals at a specific point in time and over a very short period. So we're going to look at this one little section right here at this time for cross-sectional. Case control, these studies are retrospective, meaning is to look back in time and require looking at existing records. Okay. Cohort means that we're following a group, and we do this a lot in college. We look at incoming freshmen, and we want to follow them through their tenure at Galveston College and see how they do with those. All right, a census. This is a list of all individuals. So let's talk about the U.S. Census. That means that we want to count everybody in the U.S. so that we get the best information and can make good determinations and knowledge of every single person in that census. Okay. All right, a couple of other things here. Web scrapping and data mining. This is stuff from getting information from the internet. It happens all the time. So be careful with those types of things so that you make sure it's good data if you're ever going to go onto the internet and find that. And so it happens everywhere. Just got to make sure, again, it's done in the best ethical way possible. Okay. And then the last one here is just looking at the government kind of gives some resources that we could always go to and use as well. All right. All right, so those are the things that you're going to need for 1.2.